Welcome back to LaidOPEN Podcast. This is your host, Charna Cassell. As some of you know, I was in an intensive Kundalini Yoga teacher training from April through August of this year, and it was a wild ride for me. But one of the highlights of my training was a guest teacher named Amanbir. And he's a Kundalini Yoga teacher and trainer that's empowered and trained thousands across the planet for the last 2 years. He brings in his deep passion and experience helping others to heal using Chinese medicine and astrology into his teachings. And in this conversation with Amanbir, we get some into what's happening in the world and astrology, into the value of mantra and mudra and repetitive movement and yoga as a path of compassion. So I hope you enjoy, and he is just a ray of sunshine. Welcome, Amanbir. I'm so glad to have you here.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great, laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Yes. So
we tried so many countries, so this is great.
That's right. That's right. I know. I was like, maybe the key was me leaving the United States in order for us to coincide, but we worked it out. Back in Cape Town. And the first time I encountered you was in my Kundalini Yoga teacher training. And I was really impressed and appreciated the depth of your knowledge around astrology, Chinese medicine, and sacred anatomy. And what would you say is your primary focus right now in your life in terms of what you're up to?
My primary focus right now is, there's one driving force, which is the dynamic of being in a space where I can be of service to others and help with my tools. Now, in terms of like which aspect of the tool set I use, it varies throughout the year. And so I get to enjoy okay, now is the dynamic where I get to teach a yoga training. Okay, now the dynamic where I get to work with someone's astrological chart, give them insights that can help their life. Okay, now is the point where I can work with someone's health and anatomy to prescribe a Chinese script and give them a formula recommendations to improve their mind-body health. So it really just depends on what comes to me and which stage of the year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for you, how did you come to Kundalini Yoga?
I came to it, I was studying engineering and I was looking for ways to actually help manage stress. And so I knew that I loved to volunteer. So I was just let me look online, and I went on Craigslist. And the first line that popped up in the volunteer section was free yoga for volunteer service. And at that point I had done some hatha, but my teacher had moved away. And then I didn't even think of doing another yoga class. But I was just I like yoga. I like volunteering. That sounds great. Best of both worlds. And it just happened to be a Kundalini Yoga studio.
Mm-hmm. And so, before coming to Kundalini many years ago, I was healing from tendinitis through Iyengar yoga. There's a level of precision, and it's really great for trauma and for healing physical injury. But people really don't know a lot about Kundalini in terms of what Kundalini is useful for. What would you say?
Well, I would say Kundalini Yoga is useful. There's so many branches within Kundalini Yoga. So it really depends. Even I may work with a client who just comes to me for acupuncture. Mm-hmm. And they may not be open to the idea of meditation. But I can give them just one of the breathing practices, pranayams from Kundalini Yoga, as a prescription that I know will help them. And I'll explain the benefits of that particular pranayama to them. And they'll do it without even necessarily the context of like, that they're a Kundalini yogi, so to speak. So it can help even on like that, the aspect of like someone's personal health and well-being. But wider than that, the practice is great ultimately for self-knowledge, empowering a person to have a greater understanding of themselves. And then I think from there, that understanding of self is like through the lens of compassion, clarity, patience. And when you can understand yourself through a lens of compassion, clarity, patience, then it's easier to have that same capacity for other people on this planet.
Yeah, it's an interesting path because, yoga has gotten so separated from being a spiritual path and being a holistic path. It's like you can go to a gym and just, take a power yoga class or something. And for it to actually become more of a holistic approach to self-awareness is not always what it looks like. And then you take something like Kundalini Yoga, and people, even though, people will say, oh, that person has good energy. They will then, you could ask that same person something about energy or energy work or meridians, and they know very little about it. But we're actually always attuning to one another in an energetic way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with Kundalini Yoga, there's some key components, right? There's mudras, there's mantras, there's chanting. And what would you say the benefits of mantra are?
Well, man is from the word manas, which means the mind, and tra from terang, which is like the wave. Really practically, it's a tool to help with the waves of the mind, like where the mind goes to, because the mind is something that can work for us in terms of having clarity, strategy, using our intelligence to navigate through the challenges of life. But also the mind can be in our way. The mind can be full of anxiety or misperceptions or things that lead us further into division, separation.
Mm-hmm.
It's painful ultimately. And so mantra is a way of working to help lift the mind up, to lift the mind to a greater space of clarity and focus. And it's like, even though you are doing something, like you're creating a sound, you are taking an action, typically with mantra, there's a certain quality of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And then over a period of time, that repetition actually creates a type of focus for the mind. So that type of concentration, that type of focus, to then apply that into life, which, our world is full of so many distractions. So if you can really strengthen your capacity for greater focus, so much better.
Yeah. I also find it's like what I love through mantra or even just listening to a song or a chant, that waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, that song playing in my head or that mantra occurring, so that what it tells me is that it's playing in my subconscious rather than all the mucky stuff that could be playing in my subconscious.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's like even a physical component of it, because I've tested, I still have a science mind from engineering school. So I remember like, especially in the beginning, testing everything out. Mm-hmm. And so I never forget, I was in Mexico City and I never experienced that type of traffic before. And I was with a group of friends. We were headed to a course and we're like, oh, we're going to be late with this amount of traffic. And they're like, oh, let's put on the mantra for blockages. And so I start playing in the car, we start chanting it. And then all of a sudden, it's just like somehow things started lifting through the traffic. And it wasn't only just that experience. It was like, I've used it several, even when I lived in New York, like in the subway, I'm like, okay, the train has been moving for 20 minutes. Let me just put on this mantra. Let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, the train starts moving. Great. Okay.
Yeah, I can add to that testimonial. So in 2016, I was going to have fibroid surgery. And I was doing a handful of things. One is I had a vegan diet to prepare my body for surgery. And I did mantra every morning. And I used a Rife machine, which is, do you know Rife machines?
No.
So the same way that I can never say this word right, solfeggio frequencies.
Okay, yeah.
It's like that, but there's no sound. But it's energy medicine. You put a
Yeah.
piece of DNA in the machine and it's connected to you. And so I don't totally understand how it works, but it's definitely something for you to look into. But I had 4 orange-sized fibroids before the surgery, and they were anticipating it was going to be this very long, arduous surgery. And when they cut me open and they went inside, they only found 2. So
Wow.
the however many months that I was in this regular daily practice, and I remember this visceral experience of chanting and feeling that kind of like ripping is too strong a word, but like a gentle separating, like a stretching, almost like a fascial separation that was occurring
Yeah.
in my uterus from the fibroid separating. So I've definitely, experienced that. And then also even not of this lineage. Do you know Ho'oponopono?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So I had an ongoing bladder infection. Like there was supposedly no infection, but I was feeling this like electrical pain that would not subside. And I did that mantra and I drank 9
Wow.
times roasted bamboo sea salt. And that was the only thing that made it stop. And it was like ongoing intensity. So I'm a deep believer in mantra.
Yeah. So the power of sound that is, well, sound is vibration.
Mm-hmm.
And also the power of sound, the power of our word is spoke one way of really uplifting ourselves. And of course, it helps to know the meaning of it, like, because then you can drop the resistance. Because sometimes if you don't know what you're chanting, like, wait, what am I chanting?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned pretty on, like early on when I first started teaching, like, we were chanting once. And then this woman raises her hand, she comes to the back. And it was a chanting workshop, interestingly enough. And I just like go over to her, I'm like, is everything okay? She's just like, oh, I'm pregnant. Will chanting hurt my baby? And I'm like, no, chanting is great. Great for the baby. Baby will love it.
Right. Wow.
So
You're
it can
like,
be like, no, yeah, what you're chanting. So that way you're not just like questioning, like, wait, what am I chanting? Am I chanting to someone? Like, what is going on? Am I calling something in? And so just to give that intentionality into the practice. But ultimately, it just works through the actual vibration of it, the actual sound.
Right.
It works, if someone has an open mind to it, it'll work without them even knowing what it means or what it's for.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be a tricky thing because there's appropriation from different cultures, and it's like people want to be sensitive and aware of that. And there's also there's an inherent healing in making sounds, right?
Yeah.
Given we're so much water, I've had singing bowls and put water in the bowl and played it. And then you see all these patterns and you see how impacted the water is by vibration. It's like, when you're listening to a song and suddenly your whole body is shivers. Of course, mantra impacts us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're also a musician, right?
Yeah. I'm still working on new albums. I have 4 mantra albums out.
Mm-hmm.
And like each one was just like for me, it was just like each one was just an opportunity for me to chant, and somehow I create a product that can help others with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and how cool, like through the, as you're practicing and rehearsing and wanting to record something, that like nailing it, every repetition is beneficial to you, right?
The chanting hours just with the microphone in my face. It's just, yeah.
Well, and I'm curious about the people recording, like the sound engineers, if you're recording with other people, if they've reported an impact, how it's affected them, or if you're just doing it alone.
Well, I've worked with 2 different producers. For like one producer for the first 2, another producer for the second 2. And the first producer is already like very long and dedicated yoga practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so for him, he's already like tapped into the energy of practice. But for the second producer, who's not so much experienced with yoga, with chanting, he just enjoyed the experience. It wasn't so much that he was just like, oh, I'm feeling the energy. It was so much that he was just really just been enjoying the vibe, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the other component of Kundalini Yoga, there's more than this, but mudra and often sometimes seemingly silly, like I don't understand why we're flapping or what we're doing, like some kind of physical. That was my first experience like 20 years ago of Kundalini Yoga. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm getting really hot. The value of repetitive movement, as well as
Yes.
in a still way holding a mudra. If you could speak to that as it relates to meridians and what you know regarding Chinese medicine.
Yeah. Well, there's aspects of Kundalini yoga or yoga in general that you also find some similarity of dynamics with like Qigong or Tai Chi. And the practice is that was understanding both from the yogic sense as well as from Chinese Eastern Taoist medicine is that our body is more than what we see with our eyes or even what we can see in an autopsy, that we have lines of energy that flow through our body that connect to the various organs of our body. And these meridians, these lines of energy, correspond to the health of certain tissues, health of certain organs, our emotions, our physical strength, and qualities of our mind even. And so the idea of working our body is different ways of working with various and particular meridians. And so that element, because you can just do any type of exercise, of course, you're moving your meridian. But the idea within yoga, within Qigong, within Tai Chi is these repetitive, and especially when you notice that there's a lot of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And within those repetitive exercises, it's a way of activating and working through possible any stagnation in particular meridian, or to strengthen the flow, the connection through various meridians. Through the armpit is the heart meridian, for example. A lot of like flapping exercises, there's some stimulation of the heart meridian.
I want to share a story, and I don't want to scare anybody off of Kundalini Yoga because I think it's actually a really powerful technology. Since I spoke to you last, my Kundalini Yoga teacher training has completed, and it was a very intense completion for me. We did the long Ekankar, which for anyone listening, we chanted a particular chant for 2.5 hours on several occasions. And what it did for me was, and it didn't seem like other people were having this experience, but I tend to burn through karma on a physical level. So it was intense. I had some physical fallout, some neuropathy and tendinitis that got reactivated through practice, but also dislodging of pre-verbal trauma and ancestral trauma in the form of until I was working with the right acupuncturist, what he named as a chi surge. Like I tend to get from intensive Qigong practices, like headaches. I once had a 2-month-long headache after a week-long Qigong retreat. So there's something in my system that's particular. So other people, definitely may not have this experience, but it's like the up energy versus like the downward, being able to ground it downward is not as strong and developed in me. So it was very effective in terms of dislodging and moving things, but it was almost like I picture old metal plumbing, like the pipes dislodging sediment from the insides and then like clogging. So I was having a lot of intense physical, it felt like someone was choking me and standing on my chest. It was like very intense for a while. I'm on the other side of it now.
Wow.
But if you could talk to some of that, of like it's not necessarily the shadow, but it's like, yes, you can feel euphoric and in love and totally energized after, but you can also have some intense experiences along the way.
Yeah. It's definitely a potential that someone with experience doing Kundalini yoga, just Kundalini meditation, that they can sometimes have very strong experiences. And within that ties into sacred anatomy and also the meridians as well, is that another function of the meridians is that why is there stagnation in the meridian? Why can there be stagnation in particular tissues? And it seems like that the body is a bridge. And what it's the bridge to is between our earthly existence, and the idea of our mind and our soul. And if there is something unresolved or a very intense traumatic experience that a person goes through, Or sometimes, like now, there's a lot more studies with epigenetics. It can even be a trauma that's held like in the bloodline, and can even be activated by world events.
Yeah.
And then if like, let's say that trauma is like being carried in the collarbones, and then someone just does one simple stretch, it could be cobra pose. All of a sudden, it could be an intense wave of energy and emotion, and it can feel kind of, uncomfortable, to the extreme. And in those situations, like when those type of things which can come up, then it's just like, if they're in the class, and I tell people like, okay, you don't have to, if you feel like you don't want to push past it, you don't have to, like, just allow yourself to relax, go into child's pose, relax. So, just stabilize yourself, secure yourself. Because this practice ultimately is like, it doesn't have to be so intense, although definitely people can have intense experiences.
Yeah.
And then for some people, like if they feel like, no, I can go through it, but it's really uncomfortable, it's like, okay, go through it. If they get to the point where the person's like screaming in class, that, okay, maybe not for everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Privately, in a soundproof room. But yeah, that definitely is a possibility. So the part of the role of the teacher is navigating the student's experience, and you're really watching. So that's one of the things that people are not used to, is just like the teacher just sitting there and watching them for the most part, instead of doing the practice with them. And that's the reason why is just like, what I find is, cobra poses in the Hatha yoga as well. And even in Hatha, people can have really intense experience because of that dynamic of our body, our fascia, what it can hold on to. But what I found, especially in Kundalini Yoga, like you already set the intention to being a class with this mantra, Om Namo Gurudev Namo, which is a mantra of self-initiation, tuning into your creative energy, tuning into your own inner wisdom. So it's like already saying to the universe, it's already saying to yourself, okay, I'm here to do this deep inner work. So that already is like, okay, you think you're ready? Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that already sets the tone that it can lead to more intense experiences. But ultimately, even those experiences that can be uncomfortable, they come up really because the person is ready. What I find typically is that whether someone is aware of it or not, if they already come to the practice of Kundalini Yoga and they're open to it, they're already ready to work on themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've also had friends that are like, no, I don't want to do the practice because, I have so much trauma and I just don't want to unpack it. It's fine. I keep it buried.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, I've heard that from my own mom, actually. And then there's this interesting thing. Well, yeah, she's like, I've got 20 good years left. I don't want to go to therapy, or I don't want to, and I can totally respect that. And I wish that I could choose that path. And that's just not who I am in this timeline. I'm curious about that though, like, especially this piece of, because I do feel very tied to my mom, and have definitely, I feel like I see and physically feel and process things for her through my own system. And I'm curious about what you've experienced personally or for other people in terms of the processing of ancestral trauma, what's been reported to you or what you've experienced.
Yeah, well, my own experience, and then also just what I've, seen and heard from friends and community and students who've done this practice, is that really is like the practice that you do on yourself is not just for you. It's working on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like working, especially, it's a lot more potent on those that you have immediate connections to. So those you have intimacy with, it can be your children, it can be your parents, it can be, siblings. It's just because those immediate connections, it's like that's what you're working on as well within the practice, because we are not truly, even though we have this body and we could say I'm an I, we're truly not separate. And so the practice works on more than just ourselves. And there's a dynamic, like even just practically. So as an example, I used to work in law. So after engineering school, I was figuring it out, like, okay, how can I help the world? And I was very into protesting in my college days, but I realized just like, okay, I want to support others in protest, but protesting is not for me. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can be like, civil rights lawyer. Let me pursue law for a few years. Let me see if that's my path. which I realized it wasn't, but but I was still glad I did. So at that time, I was still learning Kundalini Yoga, and there was one part where I had to start working with this one partner in the firm who has an intense reputation and can be quite belligerent. And so my first reaction, of course, was actually fear. I was like apprehensive, like, oh no. But then I realized, I was like, you know what? Let me just work on my energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I can. Not responsible for his energy, but I can be responsible for my own. And so I was practicing various pranayama exercises, and I did it in the mirror so I could be with him, not look obvious, not look like I'm, the deposition. And what I found is whenever I was with him, it was like kind of like he was my like gift, because whenever I had to be with him, I was doing some heavy pranayama, which feels good. But what I noticed was, despite what I've noticed was his belligerence towards other people in the office, he was always very kind, very gentle, very warm with me. And he would just call me buddy. Ever I was around him. Like he never, in person, he never screamed at me. He only screamed once at me by accident. And I was with the lawyer, and we were in like the hotel room at a deposition. And I was in the lawyer's room, I pick up the phone and kept screaming. And I'm like, sorry. And he's like, oh, it's you, buddy. Sorry. Put him on the phone.
Well, and some would say your heart rate variability, or like the morphic field around you.
Yeah.
Right? Like in the process of doing that breathing, you were shifting your own heart rate, and it probably impacted, and he could feel his own heart rate.
Yeah.
That's one theory I have.
Yeah. Yeah. So I take that into now in a situation where there is, abuse of any kind, that I wouldn't advocate that someone then goes into a meditative state, like get yourself into safety. But in those situations where we can find people within our lives annoying or, challenging to some degree, what I find is great within the practice is like those people, if you work with the practice, it can really help you to kind of shift your relationship, your dynamic for those people. And he's not the only one. Like there's many people that I'm like, find myself like, oh my gosh, this person's so mean. Oh my gosh, this person. Then I'm like, wait, let me go into my practice. And really shifted the relationship and that dynamic. So it really showed me within those experiences how our practice works on those around us. And the thing that I really advocate when I talk to students about that is like, don't feel like, why do I have to do the work? Like, why me? It's like, instead shift it to who else?
Well, and I think that one of the things you said, which is really important, I took on, before I had a regular Kundalini yoga practice, the first round when Trump was elected, and not connected to him. This was more about what I had an astrologer that I worked with who gave me this mantra, was the Satanama. But during that time, to regulate myself and my own anxiety around Trump, I would do that mantra all the way to work and all the way home. And so for at least 30 minutes, like an hour a day, like 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back, I was doing that. And it was a really good time, a good period of time for me. Like I actually felt it, and I didn't even realize the impact it was necessarily having. I knew that instead of listening to the news, instead of listening to NPR, that's what I was doing, right? But I think while we may not be having an impact on, or be aware at least of the impact we're having on the source of our anxiety, we do get a say and we get to have a choice over our internal state, right? Even when things around us the external world feels out of control, we can choose to be in a practice.
It's like, I feel essential of the time.
Well, and that's, again, it's funny when you're like, oh, well, the gift inside of this grumpy lawyer was that you got to be in that practice. And the same thing, like I was pretty terrified in January and feeling myself slipping into a hole of reading and consuming too much media. And I was like, I need control over my mind. And just because you've been in a rigorous practice at some point in your life doesn't mean you don't need to. It's like it needs to be consistent. It's like pick it up again. So I that's why I chose to do that training was.
Yeah. Yeah, it can help to like a training is great because what I find with the teacher trainings is that I would say like I don't know. I don't know what the percentage, and I think it really varies from training. But what I find is more people in the last few years have come to training not to be teachers per se, but just to help give them a container
Mm-hmm.
and motivation and tools and help refine things to like give them the motivation for practice. Because one thing is in our modern world with so much separation, their community is something that can really help to sustain us.
Yes.
And then there's even choices of community because something that's very primal in the human state. You look at the Salem witch trials. Like even just think about something like that we can look back at and be like, what a horrible event. But for those people, it was something that brought a lot of joy and unity and communion over hatred.
Right. Well, MAGA.
Yeah. And this is something primal of the human nature is that community, yin and yang. So on like the challenging side, the community can really bond and be exhilarated over hatred.
Yep.
Over destruction. But also the idea, like in a teacher training, ideally, is that you have a community coming together to actually elevate, to support union, to support unity, which actually gives like a higher state of that energy of what community can provide us. So that's what I find in teacher training. So many people come for really that sense of community that uplifts, not community that's like, okay, let's, kill them, let's judge them, let's,
Yeah. I think that there's definitely
playing in the polarities. Yeah.
and there's a lot of that, and there's so much polarization in the world. And how do you use astrology? I'm curious if people come to you seeking solace through readings and understanding patterns in history.
Yeah. Well, in terms of like looking at our times, it's the same thing as like if someone came to me with their birth chart, and if I were to look at it and I'm looking and go like, "Whoa, okay, this is a heavy one," then I, with honesty but with kindness, with compassion, is the way that I will discuss it. Now, it could be somewhat my upbringing. I was raised by my mother, who's a double Virgo. She didn't believe in creating fairy tales for me. Like she was just very honest about the world.
Yes, that's what my mom was too. My mom's also a Virgo. Stop. It's called reality-based parenting.
Yeah.
And it's like, you ask your mom, am I going to die? Well, yeah, I mean, we don't know. You could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like that level.
Yes. So I find it's more empowering for people. Now, there have been times where people come to me in a state of hysteria. And that's where I'm like, can we please do a meditation first? Can we please do some breath work first? Because I was just like, I can read a chart for you or we can talk about it, but you're not in a space right now where you're going to even take in even 10% of what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really depending on what state the person is. I guess one is like full on anxiety attack. I'm not going to start talking, okay, here's the chart, here's the 12 houses. Okay, no, let's get you grounded first.
Well, what you're referring to is also, in terms of how I work with clients, nervous system regulation. You have a window of capacity to be with emotions and sensations. And when you're in your window, you're a wise resource adult and you can have perspective and you're 40 years old. And when you're out of your window, you're in a dysregulated state and you're in a traumatized state. And that is not the time to try to teach anybody anything or to take in new information. It's like regulate first. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like going up to someone having a full anxiety attack and just being like, just calm down.
Yeah, nipple sandwich. Come on, you calm down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Famous last words. Well, and so I'm curious though, in terms of historical patterns. And I think of like, an individual has a birth chart. right? It's like,
Yeah.
this is when you came into the world. Even if you were due in 2 months and you came early, this is when you actually came into the world. And what about a planet? Does a planet have a birth chart? I mean, how does that work? Like if you're looking at we can look at historical cycles of what has repeated in history and the constellations that were present during those repetitions.
Well, in Western astrology, it's not so much that we look at like the birth chart of a particular planet, but more so when certain planets are discovered, or even because it's very much astrology is about like the planets telling our lived experience, our stories here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, like Pluto, Pluto, when Pluto was demoted from a planet to a planetoid, even that was reflective of something in the collective consciousness. So what does Pluto represent? It represents the things that we don't want to look at. It represents the shadow, represents the underworld, power. And now we're demoting it. We're like making it more hidden.
What was happening in the world then? I'm so curious.
Well, there's a lot of structures are being put into place that have modeled these last. When did that happen? Because I'm thinking my first day of college was September 11th, 2000. Was it then? I think it was around that time. Yeah. So since then, it's like the world has really transformed, and there's a lot more things that are, in the underbelly, so to speak, that now been bubbling up.
And so it was demoted and it was like, let's deny the shadow. Let's put it over here. And so then what's happening now? Is there something happening with Pluto that's suddenly like the shadow is coming?
Now especially because it's just like now over these next, I think it's approximately 30 years, Pluto is what's called out of bounds. So out of bounds is this concept within astrology that think of a planet going outside the scope of the sun. So think of the sun as like the parental figure, the authority figure, and then everyone, the sun's light, is on somewhat good behavior. And then when it's like this, it's out of bounds of the sun, it's in its full expression, positive and challenging. And so Pluto's out of bounds for the next 30 years. And specifically, it started about 2.5 weeks ago. And this period will go until November 23rd. Then it will go back in bounds. But then August of next year, they'll go out of bounds again for an even longer period of time. And then each year, it's going for bigger and bigger and bigger window over the next 30 years. And then it won't happen again for another 3,000 years.
So when Pluto goes out of bound, what kinds of things can we look to? Like things that are happening in the news that might occur?
Well, Pluto is about intense revelations. It's also like, in terms of challenging, it's also like, it gives power to, I was actually just thinking about this. I was steaming today and I was just thinking, I was like meditating on this, but I was thinking about Saturn and Pluto. And Saturn, I always tell people kind of jokingly, but it's honest, is, Saturn doesn't want to kill you. But if you avoid things, Saturn will just take you by the back of the head and push you right into the subject that you're trying to avoid. And then if you continue trying to avoid, it puts on even more pressure. Whereas Pluto will kill you. And Pluto will take you into a deep and dark journey as well. It doesn't mind completely twisting and corrupting consciousness to give a different experience of like the underworld. So with this dynamic of Pluto, if people can really start, and when Pluto's out of bounds, like going into very dark and heavy spaces off of really corrupt ideas. So that's like that's the challenging side. Positive side of Pluto out of bounds is that, especially in this time period, is that it gives a little power. So ultimately, it gives, over these next 30 years, more power to the people. Now, we're seeing already, like just from some of the global events happening, we're seeing both aspects of what that can mean, power to the people. We're seeing like power to the people in terms of like mass protests against immigration. That's one side of power to the people. The other side of power to the people is more power of people to recognize their self-autonomy and to recognize the role that they can play within their local government, within their communities, with helping to shape and transform this planet.
Yeah. Yeah. May it be so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really need that.
So especially for those of us on the yogic path, it's like understanding this is the time of actually like of not avoidance. It's just like now avoidance. I say like there's times where there's our personal safety, we may have to be in delusion. We may have to be in denial.
Mm.
If we're in an intense situation. So of course, safety is paramount. Root chakra, paramount for the rest of our practice. But within this time period, this is a dive into the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
So for us yogis, it's about really cultivating safety, security, nourishment for our nervous system, especially now as we're going through these 30 years of Pluto out of bounds.
Yeah.
Because this is like deep transformation. So if we can already do that work of going through the shadow and looking at it through compassion within ourselves, then we can have that power to face the shadow of our external world, what's happening in the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is, it can be very tricky for people, even if you've been on a path for decades. My system tends to push towards challenge, right? It's known as being counterphobic. And so I've learned, and I took the ironically Kundalini Yoga training on going, okay, I cannot push myself. I need to do this in a gentle way. And yet, of course, I learned about pushing, like I developed tendonitis for straighter arms, Yeah. And so the listening for ourselves and being our own teachers, because people outside of us don't always know. They might just tell you to push through when you need to actually navigate in a gentler way and attend to your nervous system, right? It's like knowing when to turn into the challenge and when to back off and then to step back towards. And so the pace at which we each address the underworld, we need to learn how to regulate that. And that in itself is a process.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard when there's the external fervor, how to know when to engage and when to, it's like, how can we each on our own paths be the most effective at serving? And that means we really need to learn how to listen internally and how to regulate ourselves so that we can serve in an effective way.
Yeah. There's also this dynamic, the old saying, like knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also like, that's also a dynamic that's characteristic of this whole time period that we're in now, the age of Aquarius, the age of technology. And with Pluto out of bounds, it's like the access to information is incredible. What's important for us to consider with that is there's lots of information out there. There's lots of misinformation out there as well. And there's a lot of strange perspectives as well on information.
Mm.
So what really helps is like fine tuning our antenna.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend in New York who always talked about this. He even created a business at some point called Signal Over Noise.
Mm.
And it's really that we have to refine our signal because there's so much noise. There's so much information. So we could be overwhelmed by that information. We could be destroyed by that information as well. But if we refine our signal, then we allow ourselves to know how to tune in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. So is there a particular, maybe it's a breath practice, maybe it's a refining signal practice that you, like a short 5-minute practice that you could guide us through?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be great.
Okay. So this is a nice gentle one. You just bring the fingertips together and you just elbows relax. And you hold this in front of the center of your chest. So the palm just separates. It looks like a pyramid. Shoulders relax, spine tall, the neck relaxed. And then exhale all the breath out to begin. And then regulating your breath. So slowly inhaling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold the breath in gently. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And slowly exhale with control. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. 5. Hold for 5. Exhale. 5. Inhale, 5. Hold, 5. Exhale, 5. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. 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 And now relax your breath. Take a deep inhale. Deeply exhale. And then relax the hands. Just take a moment, silence, a few seconds with your eyes closed. Relax. Observe how you feel. Great.
I feel watery and soft. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And how can people find you?
They can find me. I have a website, AuthenticHarmony.com, or they can just find me on my travels.
Beautiful. What are you teaching there, or what are you doing?
I'm teaching a level 1 teacher training.
I'd love to do that with you. That's awesome.
Huh.
Lovely. Those lucky students.
Yeah, it's a beautiful experience.
Anything else that you would like to share with listeners before we say goodbye for now?
Yeah, man, I'm happy to just be a resource, to reach out, and just in these times in general, just find yourself that lens, to give yourself the space wherever you need it, that gives you a greater space of compassion for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find yourself in a space of like duality or conflict, just know that it's not just you, it's the times that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find yourself going into a mental space of separation, that's the opposite of compassion. So see what you can do checking in with yourself first and foremost that allows you to change. So there may be times where we do have to take action. Like there may be times where we do have to protest. There may be times where you have to go to court or whatever it may be for justice, for equality, for kindness, for ultimate compassion. But within yourself, it's like keep checking in with yourself that you can read all from a space of the heart, lead all from a space of passion, because that is like the radical work and opportunity of this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A deep heart-centered embodiment is totally radical. To like reclaim your body and your heart and your mind in that way, I do believe is a radical act.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, rate, and review and share with your friends. And if you're interested in finding out more about my work, you can go to passionatelife.org and you can read my blog and look at my course that I offer, as well as a workbook that I've written at charnakassel.com. If you're curious to learn more about Kundalini Yoga and dip one little toe, you might want to consider joining my embodied relating group, which is going to involve somatic practices, and I'm going to be bringing in Kundalini Yoga practices into it as well. It's going to be a 12-week group that starts in January. You can keep your eyes peeled. So thank you again for joining us.